Okay, so let me tell you something that most people covering this case got completely wrong. There is a man who was arrested in connection with the ransom notes in the Nancy Guthrie case. His name is Derek Callella. He is 42 years old. He lives in Hawthorne, California. He worked as a clerk at the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services, and he had absolutely nothing to do with where Nancy Guthrie actually is. Think about what that means. The only arrest made in this entire case, 148 days in, belongs to a man who never set foot in Tucson, never had any connection to the real kidnappers, never knew a single detail about what actually happened on the night of February 1st. He saw a national story, opened a fake phone number app, and texted a grieving daughter asking if she had received her Bitcoin. That is the breakthrough the headlines are calling an FBI arrest. And understanding exactly why that matters, and exactly why it changes nothing about finding Nancy Guthrie, is the whole point of tonight. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear about where this investigation actually stands. The real kidnapper, the masked armed figure caught on Nancy's doorbell camera, has not been identified publicly. He has not been charged. He has not been arrested. The investigation remains active. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department are working this case together every single day. We state that every single time. Okay? So let me walk you through what Callella actually did. Because when you see the full picture of what he did versus what the real kidnappers did, the contrast tells you something important about the intelligence of the people the FBI is actually hunting. According to federal court records, on February 4th, 3 days after Nancy disappeared, Callella sent 2 separate text messages from a voice-over internet app to Annie Guthrie and her husband Tommaso Cioni. The message read, "Did you get the 12 Bitcoin? Waiting on our end for the transaction." 3 minutes after those texts landed on their phones, someone from that same number called a member of the Guthrie family. The call lasted 9 seconds. Now I want you to picture Annie Guthrie in that moment. Her 84-year-old mother has been missing for 3 days. She is already receiving ransom notes at media outlets. She is terrified, exhausted, desperate for any word, and her phone lights up with a message asking about Bitcoin. She does not know yet that this person is sitting in California watching the news. For 9 seconds, she may have thought the person on the other end of that call knew exactly where her mother was. The FBI traced that number inside 24 hours. According to investigators, the messages led back to a VoIP account registered in Callella's name, connected to an IP address at his California home. When agents questioned him, Callella told them he sent those messages to see if the family would respond. That was his stated reason, to see if they would respond. He was arrested the very next day, February 5th, and charged with transmitting a ransom demand in interstate commerce without disclosing his identity and using a telecommunications device to harass. As U.S. Attorney Timothy Corchain stated publicly, the Department of Justice will protect victims and families at all costs, and grief profiteers will be held accountable. Now here is what I need you to understand about the speed of that arrest. Under 24 hours. From fake text message to FBI agents at his door. That is how fast the Bureau moves when the digital trail is clean and the person is sloppy. Callella used a VoIP app registered to his real name connected to his home IP address. He may as well have signed the text messages. The FBI did not even have to work hard. His trial was scheduled for June 23rd at the federal courthouse in Tucson. The week before it was supposed to happen, his attorneys filed a motion to continue. The trial did not take place. According to court records, a change of plea hearing was then set for July 2nd at that same Tucson courthouse. Derrick Callella, the man who texted a missing woman's daughter about Bitcoin while the entire country was searching for her, is expected to plead guilty. The first courtroom result in the Nancy Guthrie case, and the real kidnapper is still free. Now hold that thought. Because while Callella was being sloppy in California, the real kidnapper, or someone directly connected to the real kidnapping, was doing something completely different, something deliberate, something that the FBI kept completely secret for 4.5 months. And something that, according to investigators familiar with the case, contained details about the inside of Nancy Guthrie's home that no stranger watching the news from California could ever have known. Because there were not just fake notes in this case, there were 2 notes that were different from everything else. 2 notes that investigators believe came from the people who actually took her. And what those 2 notes said, in sequence, is the most important evidence this investigation has produced in 148 days. and the second one said something that changes everything you thought you understood about this case. Okay, so let me tell you what was actually inside those two credible notes, because this is the part that the headlines kept vague, that investigators kept sealed for 4.5 months, and that most people following this case still do not fully understand. And once you hear it in sequence, the way it actually unfolded, you are going to understand immediately why the FBI treated these notes differently from every other piece of correspondence this case generated. The first credible note arrived on February 2nd. One day after Nancy disappeared. It was sent simultaneously to 3 media outlets, 2 local Tucson news stations and TMZ, through their online tip portals. According to investigators familiar with the case, that note demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin for Nancy's safe return and gave the family a deadline. But here is the part that stopped investigators cold. Buried inside that note were 2 specific details about Nancy Guthrie's home that had never appeared anywhere publicly. An Apple Watch with a white band lying on the floor of her bedroom, a broken light on her back porch. You cannot find those details on Google. You cannot guess them from a news broadcast. You cannot know them from watching Savannah Guthrie's Instagram. Those details exist in one place only, inside that house, which means whoever wrote that note had either been inside Nancy's home or was in direct contact with someone who had. Think about what the investigators are sitting with at that point. Dozens of fake notes are flooding in from strangers across the country, and then this one lands, with the Apple Watch, with the broken porch light, 2 details that function like a password, 2 details that separate the person who actually knows something from every opportunist who does not. According to CBS News, confirmed by investigators familiar with the case, both credible notes are believed to have been sent from the same computer IP address. The same person, or the same group, sent both. Now here is why that matters enormously. Because the second note, which arrived 4 days later on February 6th, was nothing like the first one. It did not demand money. It did not give a deadline. It did not make any ask at all. What it did instead is something that former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer told Newsweek she has never encountered in any other kidnapping case she can identify. It explained what happened, voluntarily, unprompted, to a family that had no legal or practical way to compel that explanation from anyone. According to NBC News, reported by Tom Winter and Andrew Blankstein, and confirmed by 3 people familiar with the matter, the second note said this: "She perished shortly after she was taken. They never intended to hurt her. She is buried in nature now. We are truly sorry." Read that back one more time. She perished shortly after she was taken. Buried in nature now. We are truly sorry. Now I want you to ask yourself something, and I need you to be honest about your answer. What kind of kidnapper writes that? What kind of person who planned a crime, surveilled a property multiple times, came equipped with a weapon and gloves and a backpack and a mask? What kind of person then voluntarily contacts the victim's family to say it was an accident and they are sorry? As Coffindaffer put it to Newsweek, there is no reason to do that. There is no reason for an abductor to give details like this. They could just disappear. They do not owe any explanation, especially when the plot has already been foiled, and yet they wrote it anyway, which tells you something specific about who this person is. Not a professional, not a cartel, not someone who has done this before and knows how to walk away clean. According to Coffindaffer, this is someone who watched an elderly woman's body fail in their hands and could not carry the weight of that in silence. Someone who needed the family to know it was not supposed to happen this way. Someone who, in her words, has a murder on their hands as opposed to a kidnapping punishable by the death penalty in Arizona, and is already thinking about what happens when they are caught. Now here is the detail from the second note that has not been fully discussed anywhere. The note did not just say she died. It said she is buried in nature now. That specific phrase, buried in nature. Not discarded, not disposed of, buried, as though someone made a deliberate choice to treat her body with some form of respect even after everything that happened. Criminal profiler John Kelly, who reviewed the notes for Fox News Digital, said the language reads as if written by 2 different personalities. He described the porch guy, the masked figure on that doorbell camera, as someone who, in his words, would not know a feeling if they tripped over one. Someone cold, calculated, Someone who covered that camera without hesitation and stood on an 84-year-old woman's porch with a weapon and showed no visible anxiety on footage reviewed by dozens of investigators. Kelly's position is that the person who physically carried out the abduction did not write those notes. The emotional register is wrong, the empathy is wrong, the guilt is wrong. What that theory suggests, and investigators have not ruled out multiple people being involved, is that someone in the orbit of the main kidnapper, someone who knew what happened, someone who was there or was told what happened, wrote those notes. Someone who could not stop themselves from reaching out to a family whose pain was being broadcast on national television every single morning. Someone who knew exactly which Apple Watch was on the floor of Nancy's bedroom because they had been inside that house. Now here is where this case takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Because the FBI asked every outlet that received the second note to keep its contents completely secret. They held that information for 4.5 months. Every outlet agreed. They did not release the phrase "buried in nature." They did not confirm Nancy was dead. They did not share a single word of what that second note said. And the reason investigators gave was this: if further correspondence came from the same source, they needed to be able to authenticate it. You only hold information back for that reason if you genuinely believe more communication is coming. And on June 26th, 148 days into this investigation, it did. According to TMZ, authenticated using the same Bitcoin wallet address and email alias verified in all previous credible communications, a new email arrived. This person has now contacted TMZ approximately a dozen times since February, and this latest message claims something no previous note had claimed: a phone, hidden in a secure location, containing a short video of the main kidnapper standing next to Nancy Guthrie on what the sender describes as probably the last day of her life. Pictures of both people involved, full names, home addresses, ages, everything needed to identify two people and put them in handcuffs, according to the sender, sitting on one device. And the price for that device's location and password is 1 Bitcoin. TMZ asked for a single screenshot from the video to verify the claim. The sender refused, said the metadata would lead investigators directly to him, said he was afraid of what the kidnappers would do if they found out he had been talking. Now here is the question I want you to sit with. And this one matters more than almost anything else in this entire story. A person who has a video of the main kidnapper with Nancy Guthrie on the day she died. A person who has both their names, their addresses, their photographs. A person who, by their own description, could deliver these people on a silver platter. Why is that person emailing TMZ instead of walking into an FBI field office? That question does not have a comfortable answer. And what the FBI did next tells you they are not comfortable with it either. Okay, so here is where the two sides of this investigation split completely apart. And understanding that split is the key to understanding where this case actually goes from here. On one side, you have Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. On June 26th, the same morning the TMZ email dropped, Nanos went on Cavoy AM 1030's Buckmaster show in Tucson and addressed the new claim directly. He said he thinks the FBI has done a number of arrests for false or fake ransom notes and that he believes this latest development is looking like another one of those. He acknowledged that 2 notes exist that investigators believe may have some legitimacy and said the FBI is working those. But on the phone with the video and the names and the addresses, his public position was skepticism. He did not say the FBI had investigated and dismissed it. He said, "We will let the FBI do their work." And then he moved on. Now I need you to notice something important about that statement. A sheriff who genuinely believed a lead was worthless would not say, "We will let the FBI do their work." He would say, "We have looked at this and it does not check out." The careful language tells you there is distance between his personal read and the official investigative position. And that distance matters. Because on the other side of that split, the FBI has been doing something very different from dismissing this sender. According to Fox News, the FBI's information technology teams have spent months attempting to trace the digital footprint of these email communications. And at one point, 5 federal agents were on a joint call with TMZ's own IT department working to track the sender's infrastructure. 5 agents, on a call with an entertainment outlet's tech team. You do not dedicate that level of resource to someone you have already written off. You dedicate that level of resource to someone you believe knows something real and whose identity you are actively trying to establish before they go silent or make a mistake that destroys the evidence they claim to have. Now here is where I want to challenge you directly, because I think this is the question that this entire case keeps circling without anyone saying it plainly enough. This sender has contacted TMZ approximately a dozen times since February, every single time using the same authenticated Bitcoin wallet address and the same verified alias. Not once in 12 contacts across 5 months has the story changed in a way that contradicts itself. Every new claim has been internally consistent with every previous communication. Every new detail has been consistent with what the credible notes already established. A random fraudster does not maintain that level of consistency across 5 months without slipping. A random fraudster sends one message, gets ignored, and moves on. This person keeps coming back, and every time they come back, they add something new. Ask yourself, what kind of person does that? What kind of person contacts a media outlet a dozen times over 5 months using authenticated credentials, refuses to collect any money, refuses to provide proof, and keeps escalating the specificity of what they claim to have? According to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, that profile is consistent with someone who is genuinely conflicted, someone carrying information they cannot put down, someone who keeps reaching out not purely for money, but because the weight of what they know is becoming impossible to manage alone. And that psychological state, under sustained investigative pressure, with a $1.2 million reward sitting unclaimed, makes a person unstable in ways that eventually produce mistakes. Now let me tell you about the mistake investigators are most focused on, because this is where the forensic picture gets genuinely interesting. According to reporting, the FBI is simultaneously tracking the digital infrastructure of these emails and working the blockchain trail connected to the Bitcoin wallet used across all credible communications. And here is what most people do not understand about Bitcoin. Every single transaction on the blockchain is permanent. It cannot be deleted, it cannot be altered. Every wallet has a traceable history that forensic accountants and blockchain analysts can follow backward through every transaction that wallet has ever been involved in until they reach a verified identity. The sender believes they are untraceable. The FBI has a different view, and they have the tools and the time to prove it. There is also the matter of the original credible notes themselves. According to Airmail, whose investigative reporter Howard Bloom has had access to sources inside the investigation since the beginning, one lead after another has petered out. Suspects have been taken into custody and swiftly released. The Special Task Force, a unit of FBI agents and Pima County homicide detectives, keeps returning by default to the ransom notes, because the notes are the thread that has not broken. They are the one element of this investigation that contains information only someone connected to the crime could have provided. And now a person claiming to be connected to those notes is escalating their communications in a way that suggests something has changed for them internally. Something has shifted. Something has made the silence harder to maintain than it was in February. Now here is the forensic detail I want you to hold on to. Because according to investigators, the DNA recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home came back with no match in the CODIS database. No prior arrests, no criminal record. No previous contact with the justice system, which means the person or people who took Nancy Guthrie are living what appears from the outside to be a completely ordinary life. They go to work, they have addresses, they have ages. They are exactly the kind of people the sender of these emails claims to have photographs of. And the genetic genealogy work now being conducted at a forensic laboratory connected to the same team that identified Rex Heuermann as the Long Island serial killer does not require a CODIS match to produce a name. It builds a family tree from a DNA sample and works backward through public genealogy databases until it reaches a living person. That process takes time, but it does not fail when the biological material is viable. Think about what happens when those two threads meet. The blockchain trail and the genetic genealogy work running simultaneously in parallel toward the same destination. One identifies the sender of these emails. The other identifies whoever left biological material inside Nancy's home. If those two identities connect to each other in any way, through family, through association, through geography, the case does not just break, it closes. And here's the final thing I want to say about Derrick Callella before we close, because his guilty plea, whenever it is formally entered, carries one detail that gets overlooked in the coverage. He worked for the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services as an intermediate clerk. He was already facing separate charges in California for allegedly stealing nearly $10,000 in false unemployment benefits as part of a broader fraud case involving 13 county employees. This is not a person with the resources, the planning capability, or the operational sophistication that the real kidnapping required. The person on that porch covered a doorbell camera, wore double gloves, carried a specific backpack, surveilled the property on multiple occasions across several weeks, and executed a kidnapping in under 3 minutes with no witnesses and no forensic errors visible to the public. That is not Derek Callella. Callella is the noise, the porch guy is the signal, and the signal has been there since 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, waiting to be identified. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She tended her garden in the Catalina foothills. She went to Mass every Sunday morning. She had dinner with her daughter on the last night anyone who loved her saw her standing upright. And somewhere right now there is a phone in a secure location that may contain the last images of her alive. There is a blockchain trail being followed, transaction by transaction. There is a DNA profile being run through a genealogy database that has broken cases colder than this one. And there is a person who has been emailing TMZ for 5 months, who cannot stop reaching out, who keeps adding detail, who is carrying something they were never built to carry alone. The FBI has the time. The FBI has the tools. And the game clock belongs to the investigators, not to whoever is sitting on that phone. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. It is completely anonymous. The Pima County Sheriff's Department can be reached at 520-351-4900. The combined reward is over $1.2 million, and it remains completely unclaimed. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because when that blockchain trail leads to a name, when that DNA result comes back from the genealogy lab, when the person carrying all of this finally makes the mistake the FBI has been waiting for, you need to be here first.